What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Be Better podcast. I'm here with a special guest of mine, Sifu Slim, with episode 18. Sifu, how you doing today?
Doing very well, Nate. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. So we were talking a little bit beforehand about just kind of like the divine way that fate kind of brought us together, through your VA essentially. And that's just fantastic, man. I just want to say thank you again for being on here. I know the quick conversations that we've had, I mean, you just seem like one of the most interesting people I've ever met. And I cannot wait for our viewers to kind of get a brain dump of your philosophy and the way you live your life.
You bet. I'm glad to share it.
Fantastic. So let's get started. I mean, obviously, I know a little bit about you, but for those out there who don't, could you please give them the rundown about who you are, what you do, what makes you tick?
So, a long time ago, I was a skinny kid, age 6, and I had older sister, had a father, and I had kids in the neighborhood. I wanted to be, older, stronger kid. I wanted to be able to do things with my mind, my body, my learning, my friendships. I wanted to be a kid that was well-rounded. And so I thought at one point in my life I would grow into being a stronger kid, maybe be like the linebacker. But when I was a kid, I flunked the weight qualification to play the Pop Warner type football where you get the pads and the helmet and all the deal twice. I think I was 7 and I failed, and I was 8 and I failed the weight. And there was an older gentleman. He might have been in his late 70s or 80s. He was always there at the scale. He was looking at me and my father, who's a tall, thin guy also. And they both saw how much I wanted to play, but he would shake his head. You're not heavy enough. You're not heavy enough. And finally, by the time I think I might have been 8.5 or 9, I passed the weight class and I got on there. And then along the way, I did all these sports and I started growing, like high school size. And then I thought I was just with all my weight training and eating, I thought I could be a linebacker at some point. But by the time I was 17 or 18, I realized that wasn't going to be part of me. So I had to grow into being a slim, athletic dude and figuring out how to deal with the physicality of bigger, stronger athletes and the time requirement I had, which was an extra maybe hour and a half to 2 hours a day of fitness, plus the rest it takes with all that fitness, like weight training, to deal with people who are just Schwarzenegger builds, um, uh, mesomorph builds, where they didn't have to do all those extra 3 or 4 hours. They were kind of showed up on the field like Bo Jackson or Herschel Walker, these great athletes, all ready to go. And so along the way, I said, okay, what can I win in? I can win in fitness, wellness, lifestyle, learning, strategy, adapting, and sustainability. So from the physical, I was able to put together a program that allowed me to achieve a lot of my physical goals. And then because I'm firing the neurology when I'm doing all this physicality, I'm just saying my brain's lit up and I'm curious. So how can I learn more? We can talk about how I was able to learn, as much as I could, given the time requirements and the time limitations that one has when one is working and living a normal life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love what you said about how you're different. You kind of went to different areas that you could use to kind of get the edge because the physicality side wasn't going to be it, right? So you figured, hey, here's 6 other areas of opportunity that I can use to dominate and be a powerhouse in the category, right? Um, so I think a lot of people they go out there and whenever they're told, hey, you're not making weight, you're never going to own up or be up to this status, right? They give up. And it seems like you didn't give up, right? You found those other platforms to, kind of get the leg up on the competition. What made you think that? Like what made you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to figure this out instead of giving up.
I think it's like fishing. You mentioned you were a fisher, and other people are hunters, and other people want to achieve something. They start out in a job at the mall, working at a store in retail, and they see other things that they want and other people who have achieved these things. And I was always like that. Fortunately, I spent a lot of time with my father, and he was successful in business. He was always reading books. He always asked us questions at the dinner table on car trips, et cetera. And he was always testing us. And my mother was also a reader, and she went along with that program too. And they kind of enhanced us in terms of providing the food, the shelter, the books, taking us to the doctors, taking us to ice skating and hockey classes, whatever classes. The 4-H, I was in the 4-H, so I learned how to do public speaking at a young age. And the other thing I had helping me when I was a kid, we had to do book reports all the time. And even if it was only a 4-page thing out of a chapter, we were constantly up in front of the class from the time I was 6 years old, and I never stopped. And I feel sorry for a way with people who are in the texting generation and afraid of public speaking, because I think it's such a nice way to test your knowledge and to share that self-expression. But your question was, how did I make that decision? I had mentors and people around me, and I saw what they were doing, and I saw how comfortable they were in these various activities: public speaking, sports, learning, gardening, fishing, hunting. And I knew that if I had patience and I stayed with the program, I could master those things. And I've mastered a lot of stuff. I'm a really good cook, and I cook good food. I don't do really fancy dishes, but nobody complains about the meals that I cook fresh. When sometimes I'm eating stew that's on the third day. Some people might not want to eat stew that's 3 days old, but I'm completely fine with that. And that stew cooking saves me a lot of time so that I can do the fitness, take a nap, work on reading books, work on new videos. I want to study on documentaries on YouTube, great public speakers who know history, sociology, science, psychology, whatever. All of that stuff, I have more time because the way I've dialed in my living, mostly for my 2 main meals a day besides breakfast, mostly living on stew.
Yeah, I mean, we have to share some DNA somewhere, man, because you're sounding like an older version of me. I mean, everything that you're saying that you like, it's like I'm talking to myself. It's kind of funny. You mentioned something there a little earlier about communication, and I want to touch on that really quick before we dive into all these other topics. I completely agree with you. If my generation, I'm 27, turning 28, and the younger generations, my little brother, for example, he's 16, or excuse me, 15, turning 16 in August. Excuse me. They lack public speaking skills. They lack communication skills. Having a conversation with most people my generation and his generation and below is like pulling teeth, right? Because they're always here, right? It's always a digital word. Their values and digital assets, which in my opinion doesn't mean anything, because what if you have the cure for cancer, but you just don't have the ways to communicate it, so it never becomes out to the light, right? What if you have the best idea out there to solve a problem, right? You're in a situation, and it doesn't matter if you're trying to, save somebody in a burning building or get your project done in school. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is. If there's a objection or an issue or a problem that you're trying to face, you could have the solution, but how do you verbalize it? How do you get your message portrayed? And I think, one thing that I've always realized for me, I've always tried to hone my communication skills as strongly as I could, because as a kid, I never was heard. Nobody cared. I had a tough upbringing. Nobody gave a shit what I said, right? So as I grew older, I was like, well, I'm going to make sure my message is heard, and I'm going to make sure that the message I portray is going to be done eloquently. I can't speak today, excuse me. And also thoroughly, where people, understand what I'm trying to say, my message gets across, my purpose gets across. And I just wonder where maybe it came around with texting, maybe it came around with cell phones, the digital world. I'm not sure, but I just wish more people in the younger generation would take their communication and public speaking skills more serious, because it's a game changer. I mean, I could go toe to toe. Excuse me, I could go toe to toe with somebody. Let's say we're both interviewing for the same role. They could have a better resume than I could. They could have more experience than I could. But if they can't verbalize that and kind of portray that to the employer, who do you think they're going to pick? It's that simple in this world.
Yeah, and I think just based on the short conversations that we've had, I think people are going to be going to you to try to impress, and they already are in some of your capacities. But instead of you having to impress, I think you're going to be the one that they go to, Nate. And so, leadership and productivity and making good decisions. I think that those are some things that I'm gathering from your bio that you're gaining in and, making some progress in. And so I think other people are going to be more and more going to you to try to impress, going to you for wisdom, going to you for your blessing. So congratulations on being on that path, Nate.
Thank you so much, Sifu. I really do appreciate it, because it is coming more frequent that people have been reaching out to me for just advice or input. And like I'm not saying that arrogantly by any means. I don't get an ego stroke from that. It just makes me honored that they think that I have the wisdom or knowledge to solve their problem or to help them solve their problem. And it's such an honor when people reach out to me. Some people hate when people go to them with their problems. Excuse me. I love it when people reach out to me as their problems, as long as not habitually, right? If somebody's like, "Hey Nate, I can't stop doing drugs," and I tell them the solution to stop, and then they come to me 2 weeks later and they have the same issue, obviously I'm not really a big fan of that. That drives me nuts. But when people have these issues that they think I can help solve, I love being a part of the process and giving them my perspective. I'm assuming, Sifu, in your life as well, I'm sure a ton of people often come to you for the same deal.
They do. And while you were speaking, you mentioned the word difficult and difficult situations. And there's a quote I have, I think it's from Daniel Goleman on his book Focus. And he talks about something, and he has this sentence. He says, when you're in a difficult situation, all you have is the truth. And that's something that I think you and I could spend a few minutes fleshing that out, because in politics and in corporations and in roles of leadership, it's often like the case where the truth is hidden and you keep saying something that benefits your side. We see this in our top politicians. We see this in our friendships. Sometimes it's hard for people to tell the truth. And we can talk about why that is. But I think if we had more people, instead of saying, yes, I'm doing fine, when you say, hey, how are you doing today? If they really told you, if they're a connection with you, or if you're waiting at the bus stop and the bus isn't there and you've got a few minutes, they actually told you some things that were going on or some things they're having trouble with, you might have 2 minutes or 10 minutes waiting there, and you could have that interaction where you bond for a little bit. And even if you're just a sounding board, even if you're just listening to that person, it may help them, it may help you. The human dynamic does its thing. And then we go on about our way. And if you do have a couple of pointers you wanted to share with that person, you want to send them a link to something, you can do that right there from your smartphones. And there you are, helping someone in the journey of life.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And you know what? Unfortunately, in this world, and I always use America as my testing ground because I've only been to two countries, Mexico and America, but I've lived in America my whole life, so I think I know the American populace fairly well. Um, in America, we're so aggressive towards each other. We're so defensive towards each other. Just if you've ever walked down an American city street, everybody's reserved. They're like this. They're tight knit. Like for me, I live in St. Louis, and I have my hand on my pistol because it's a dangerous area, and I'm ready to defend myself at any given moment. So, but I wish that there wasn't the way, because, what you just said is humongous, right? If we're at a bus stop or waiting in line and we just have that small interaction, who knows? Like, I've heard countless of stories of like, people on the borderline of suicide, and they just had one interaction at a pizza parlor that stopped them from killing themselves, for whatever reason, that just one interaction. I think the problem is the underlying tone in America is that, don't tell people your problems because half of the people are glad you have them and the other half don't care. When in reality, I don't think that's always true. I think that as humans, we naturally have a want to help people. We're a tribal species, right? We're a tribal and community species. That's why we're not sedentary. That's why people that live in sedentary states in this world die 10 years sooner than people that are married, right? That's just what it is. Um, I wish, though, as a populace, we could get together and have those normal, casual interactions that sometimes mean the world. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're just blowing hot air. But still, what are you doing? You're working on your communication skills. You're getting out of your comfort zone by talking to a stranger. And at the same time, like, who knows the demons that that person or yourself has been fighting all day? And just to have some normalcy and interaction on a eye level area could make the difference. Honestly, I agree with you, Sifu, 110%.
There's a thing, Nate, and I'm sure you've been to classes and read books and thought about a lot. It's goal setting. So there's a visualization thing that I came up with about a bridge. What bridge do you need to cross? Why aren't you crossing it now? And then the next sentence I have as a Sifu teacher, helper, empathetic person. Should we meet on the bridge? So there's the 3 steps. What bridge you need to cross? Why aren't you crossing it now? Should we meet on the bridge? And so if you're on one side and I'm on the other, I can meet you wherever we meet, and we could look out, we could hug, we could high five. I could hand you a $10 bill or $100 bill if I have extra and you need to do something with that money. There's all kinds of things that we can do when we get out of our maybe comfort zone or difficulty zone, wherever we are, and we cross that bridge and we meet there at some place and we connect as two human beings. And that's, we've got brotherly love, we've got fatherly love, motherly love, sisterly love, all these things. But as human to human, the more we can do that, and the more time we have, which is why I don't like the 12-hour workday. And then more than that, like Steve Jobs. When I watched the documentary on Steve Jobs, which is the movie about Steve Jobs, where the actor looks a lot like him, I saw that he was a pusher. I saw that he was always staying late at the office and going home, wired, not tired, no physical activity. And he did a lot of wine to wind down at the end of the day. Jack LaLanne, one of my heroes of fitness, who died in 2011, 96, did a lot of wine to wind down. That's not, even though Jack LaLanne was doing fitness 4 or 5 hours a day, he still was so hyperactive, he needed to wind down. Steve Jobs, not much physicality, going about his business in his 20s through 59 or so, 57, somewhere in there, he died. And he's just pushing people and himself all the time. And to me, you can look at results in the computer age, great. But would his kids and his wife and other people like to have him around? Could he have gotten a lot of achievement by working 6 to 8 hours a day and having a balanced life? I think the answer is worth considering. I don't know the answer, but I think it's worth considering.
Yeah, I think you're right. Excuse me. I don't know what's going on with my voice today, but I think you're right 100%. Once again, Sifu, surprising. You're right again. No, because for me personally, I can only equate that to my own life. Like I told you earlier, my frequency of my brain is fast paced, quick, 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 go, 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 go. And I've had to personally adopt things in my daily regimen to slow my brain down. Otherwise, I'll lay there all night and my thoughts will eat me alive. I mean, I took to painting. I've painted 3 or 4 paintings now, and I would do that. I don't have to do it as recently. I only do it when I'm, very, very stressed out and my brain is just nonstop and I can't turn it off. Typically if I can, I'll read, I'll do some lesser bandwidth, low frequency activities, what I call them. But, before, like, right before the wedding, we were stressed out, 1,000 things going on, millions of moving pieces, people coming, going, all that good stuff, making sure everything is perfect for her special day. There'd be nights where, I just could not sleep. So what I would do, I would go paint, I would do something to slow that brain down, and I would paint on these canvas. And, I think the pictures turned out pretty well. I'm not no Leonardo da Vinci, of course, but, I really did like that. But I think you're right. I think I think the whole premise of needing things to slow down your brain is critical.
Yeah, the idea of being a pusher is something that I've researched quite a bit my entire life. And my book, The Aging Athlete, which also leads to my website, theagingathlete.com. Most athletes we know about and most of the stars on the high school and college and pro teams that we've interacted with or watched have the pusher mentality. Bruce Lee, one of my idols, was a pusher. He was a really soft-spoken guy at times in private, very deep philosophical guy. Like me, he was inhibited by being small frame. Bruce Lee, front to back, from his pecs to his back, is about that thin. I'm a little bit bigger from front to back, so I'm not as petite. I'm 6'2" and a half, and I can get up to 178 when I'm really doing well, and I'm oftentimes between 168 and 174. But it just depends on how my biochemistry and my schedule is going, my stress level, etc. Bruce Lee was vacillating between 130 something when he was at his weakest and workaholic type stuff, all the way up to 160 something when he was doing steroids. I think he did it for a period of under a year, and his brother-in-law talks about it. I'm not besmirching Bruce Lee. I'm a huge fan, love the guy. But for me to gain, to go over 180, it would have to be with using performance-enhancing substances, because my body wants to stay thin. Just like there's a difference between a basset hound and a greyhound. I'm the greyhound, and you don't, when you have to lose weight, this is an interesting little thing. when you have a basset hound, if you starve a basset hound, you don't get a greyhound, you get an emaciated basset hound. And if you pump up the greyhound, you don't get a basset hound, you get a greyhound that's got stomach disorders because he's not processing all that food, and he's probably getting other problems in his body too, maybe headaches and nausea, blah blah blah. But when you look at balance, Bruce Lee did not have that. He was a workaholic, and he had dyslexia, and then he broke his back when he was 20, somewhere between 28 and 29. He broke his back doing squats, again, trying to be bigger, stronger, and faster than he was, where he should have been working on posture. His posture was always over in that protect your internal organs pose. That's the Jeet Kune Do pose. So he didn't have the extension and the curves in the back. He was always over like a high school wrestler. Many of them are always bent over. People who work on computers or at machines are always over. So what I'm suggesting is that you take a look at people, you look at the curves of the back and proper posture, you work on that, you do exercises and lifestyle things that will help you enhance that. And you don't hold people, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, Bo Jackson, Brady, Tom Brady. You don't hold these people out as people you want to be. You can say, I acknowledge all these great performances that they did, Roger Federer, but you want to be, in my opinion, you want to be my age, 61, and have everything working. You don't want to have knee and hip operations and neck operations. You don't want to be in lawsuits. You don't want to be married 4 and 5 times. You really want balance. If you're single your whole life, kind of like moi, I'm a very balanced person. I have girlfriends. Sometimes I don't have girlfriends, but I'm always working on balance. And that's the thing that I think would make a happy, healthy Sifu guru type person. And if I can share that message and bring balance into people's lives through my coaching, through my YouTube videos, through this podcast, through my books, all those things, then I've really lived a good life where I've been paying back, paying it forward as much as possible. And that's my goal. And if people reach out and connect with me or purchase a book, just go to my website, sifuslim.com or theagingathlete.com. And then I hope I can help you with some of your first steps. Get on the path that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I love that. I really do. And I think that's one thing that people lack, right? Because we all aspire to be the greatest things, right? We always see the media figures, right? Like you said, all those people. And you covered a not only sports category there, but you covered other categories of people as well. We always aspire to be those people, right? In return, we're pushing towards that, but we're not getting what you said was critical, the balance. And other than talking to you and obviously seeing some other people say the same thing, you're never taught that. You're never taught balance. You're never taught moderation. You're never taught I don't want to call it yin and yang because that's very generic, but you're never taught the balance, right? And it seems like to me, when you find the balance and you use the balance, you're working towards your internal enlightenment, right? And you're really able to be the best version of yourself because you're firing on all cylinders in an equal direction, but the balance is critical. I mean, some people, and I'm guilty of this, excuse me, I'm guilty of this in this regard. It's 100% or nothing for me. I'm either all in or I'm not. And that might be good in some situations, but I do think in my life, and I think everybody in our lives, we need the balance. So I'm learning how to obtain that myself. I think you're going to be a great Sifu for me to learn. I think you have a wealth of knowledge that can help me kind of progress to that next level of balance. How did you figure it out? How did you figure out that balance is key? And then, after you figured it out, like, what are some of your methodologies that you do to teach your students how to kind of hone their skills when it comes to balance?
So I knew that injuries, SUCKED, they were horrible. And limping around, wiping out on your bicycle, pulling all of the skin off the knee or both knees when you wiped out on your bicycle. I've done that many times before the age of 12, and I sprained the ankles, got other injuries, hurt my back, couldn't get off the ground. I've done all those things. And these athletes, I've done some of them, in relationship to sports. Some of them I just done on my own through weightlifting or falling off of something, right? had a wipeout on a water ski, wakeboard one time. That was really brutal. I thought I was going to need surgery, but thank goodness that it was just torn ligaments, but it was really brutal. I was so inflamed, double the size, and, I couldn't drive home, had to get people to drive me home, and then the healing. So I just always knew that mangling yourself was not good. So there's the physical side. You want to be, one of my goals is to be healthy in my body and performing well. So it's all functional, it all works. My goal is to do that 100% of the time. Can I achieve that goal? No. If I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I've been doing since 1997, one of the longest active sports and activities I've ever done, you're going to get hurt. I got hurt on the average 4 times per year over the past 20 some years. And it's just the way it goes. You're rolling, you can hurt yourself. Somebody's on top of you, somebody's tweaking you. It's just the way it goes. So I learned about healing because I didn't like injuries. And I also learned about injury prevention because I didn't like injuries, right? And I don't think anybody loves injuries, but people who are pushers, they can just keep pushing and they're going, oh, I just broke my neck. Bruce Lee broke his back. And then they go, okay, now I'm going to have to deal with that. I didn't want to deal with that. Poor Bruce Lee started out with 2 painkillers a day for his broken back. He was bedridden, couldn't get out of bed. And at the end of his life, at age 32, a close contact of his, who's now dead, Bob Wall, told me that he was up to 8 painkillers a day. And these are heavy duty narcotics, which were very common in the 60s and 70s. For some people, are still common today. So I looked at all of these lessons along the way, and I said, balance, wellness, sustainability, improving your mind, but not overdoing it, not staying up until 2, partying, and then having to do coffee and Red Bull the next day in order to function. None of that stuff made any sense because it's going to hurt you now and especially in the long run. So I looked at all that stuff. I said, sustainable and balance and wellness and feeling good are important to me. Functional of mind, body, and spirit, all important. And when I perfected that, and perfection means if you're a black belt, you still have to do the black belt activities to stay in that zone. And so I work on that constantly. And for people who only have an hour to meet with me, I go over many of these things. I go over their life in a questionnaire I developed that's 8 pages long, where we go through that. And then I do a write-up, so that 8-page turns into 15 or 25 pages. And then we pick 3 things that they want to work on, not that I want to work on, that they feel they're deficient in. And then we work on them. And then there's an accountability thing, and there is, checks and balances. And we work on that over the time of our coaching thing. And as I've learned from other great coaches who've told me, all good coaches need good coaches. And it's even better if you're a coach to find a coach that you look up to and you honor and you think it's just wonderful, right? You almost worship that coach because they have stuff that you want and they're caring enough to share that with you. So those are some things that I can share about the coaching thing and aspiring to be well in mind, body, and spirit, Nate.
Yeah, Sifu, that's fantastic. I love that you said that too, because I've always believed that as well. When I was early on in my sales career, I wasn't anything special. I was a middle of the road guy, but as I developed myself and other, newer reps and people that are getting into sales reach out to me, and I've always kind of thought the good coaches have coaches themselves. Always, always, always. Because like I might be dominant in, maybe some categories of my profession, but like there's people that are my masters, that would kill me. And if it came to one-on-one, right? Like they would demolish me. Like I have so much more to learn. I have so much more to gather from them. And I'm sure they have others as well. And it's just a level thing where I'm here, they're there, their level's there, and then, so on and so forth. I think that's humongous. As far as importance goes, because, when people think they know everything, that's whenever the damage can be done. We're all on this path to just grow and continuously get better as individuals. And I think when coaches let me put this the right way. When good coaches have even better coaches coaching them, it's a winning formula every single time.
I wanted to share something with you, Nate. It's about what I do when I'm in a park. So if I'm exercising in a park, doing my morning routine. Sometimes I also do one in the evening, or I'm at a beach, or I'm at a tree. You know, I use my martial arts belt over a branch, and I do all these cool exercises with that martial arts belt. So what is my effect on myself and other people that may pass by? So I try to show that I'm an able-bodied male. That's who I am. I'm born a male. I'm still a male. And I want to show I'm an able-bodied male. I wanted to do that when I was 20, and at 61, I still want to demonstrate that to myself, even though my body's changing, my mind's changing, my energy level, testosterone, all those things change with age. And so I want to test and assess where I am, but I want to show myself and anybody passing by I'm an able-bodied male. I think it's important to do things right. It's important to use a hammer correctly, a saw correctly, to drive correctly, to take care of your pets, your significant other. Do everything correctly, right? Do that correctly. Now I have a question. Is it more important, and would you rather be a black belt who attained this thing and then stopped, or do you want to be a black belt who's still maintaining that type of thing? So weigh in on that for me, Nate, and we'll see if we can flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, Sifu, in my opinion, excuse me, I learned early on that half-assing stuff is never good. And the reason why is that, if you half-ass stuff, sometimes you might get away with it. But most of the time, you're going to have to go back and do double the effort to correct the mistake that you could have just did it right the first time. So I agree with you. Anything in my life, I always tell myself whenever I want to do a half-ass job, I always say, Nate, when's the last time you did something 100% correct and complete, right? That subconscious voice kicks in my head and I do the task. In regards to your question, option 2 for sure. I'd rather be the black belt that maintains, right? Reason why is like, I guess for me, it's great to become a black belt, right? And I love BJJ. I just recently have got involved in it again. I did some MMA classes all last year that were fantastic, and I wanted to kind of get my body into a better physical state before I started BJJ because it's incredible. But for me, the real benefit of it is to continuously maintain, because I don't think even as you're a black belt, I think any real black belt could agree with this. You're never done learning. You don't ever know everything. The black belts that I know personally, a guy I had on the podcast, I don't think he's a black belt. I think he's what's right below black, purple or blue?
It's purple.
Okay.
No, brown.
Brown,
Black,
excuse me.
brown, purple, blue, white.
That's right. He's a brown belt, and his name's Mike Linder, and he is a phenomenal person. Had him on the podcast. You guys would get along great, by the way. But he was saying, there's still many things like he's been doing jujitsu for like 15, 20 years. He's like, man, every year there's something new to learn. There's always somebody coming out with some crazy new technique or some new motion, using the gi or not using the gi. Like, it's all this awesome stuff. So I think as personal preference, I would be the option 2, the black belt that's continuing to learn, because although I am a black belt and that gives me some status, as the game is evolving, as the world is evolving, as I'm evolving, I need to be as embedded in that as possible, in my opinion.
So here's another question, follow up to that, Nate. If you get your black belt and then you stop, you're no longer a black belt. You'd agree with that, correct?
I would think at that moment you have earned the right to become a black belt, but I think you're definitely going to be passed up. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you go a year and a half without doing any BJJ, and you used to be a black belt, and you're sitting at your desk, you're not doing any fitness, you're not studying any video, your skills diminish. Like Roger Federer, the great tennis player, perhaps the most artful ballet style tennis player we've ever seen. He had injuries and he knew he couldn't keep maintaining his heavy schedule of training, travel, and competition. So he bowed out. He didn't want to come back being a lesser person and having people who are number 80 in the world or number 400 in the world giving him a tough go or beating him, right? So he retired. Hallelujah. Great. Thank you, Roger, for all the phenomenal performances that you've given us all these years. So that's him. So he's no longer a top tennis player in the world. He's a retired former top tennis player in the world. And there's nothing negative about that. He's a father of a couple of kids. So great. So there's another way that you could do, which is called being a white belt or a blue belt, maintaining your jujitsu with a schedule that you have, which could be work, family, physical activity, travel, gardening, all these other things, taking care of your mom and dad, whatever. And you could do that for a long time. And that's the path that I chose. I'm a low blue belt. I've gotten to be a little bit better. I've won some competitions, and oftentimes I won that through physical fitness because I was, sleeping better than other people. I was training better. I didn't have any injuries, and I did things the right way. I did know my moves, but there were some people who were just much more skilled in moves. But sometimes I won my competitions and my training sessions because of physical fitness, flexibility, functionality, and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I did with my jujitsu career, because I realized that for me to keep advancing was going to require a huge commitment. And my body didn't recover because I started jujitsu in my late 30s. My body did not recover. And as I kept going, it got harder on the recovery each year. So if I went 5 times a week, I was a mess. I had soreness all over the place and fatigue, and that wasn't good. But if I went 2 or 3 times per week and then I took off when I was injured, that worked really well and allowed me, with the people I started with, besides the people who became instructors, I think I outlasted almost all the people I started with because they got injured and they bowed out because they were either exhausted or injured or both. And I chose the path of, getting a blue belt and then maintaining that for a pretty long time. And that's a path that I think is something that people don't often consider.
No, I think you're right. And I think that goes back to the overlying tone of kind of our conversation is the balance portion of it, right? Like you're balancing everything the correct, appropriate way, and your body's responding more proactively to that. I mean, for sure. Is it an incredible, fantastic feat to be a black belt in jiu-jitsu? Yes, absolutely. No doubt about it. But that's not obtainable for everybody. And I love the way you just said, because, anybody, and especially me, just recently going to a first couple classes, um, you know, we all aspire, once again, we all aspire to be that peak black belt.
Yeah.
And some of us will get it, right, Sifu? Some of us won't. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
But to be able to continually grow in the right direction and be that, like you said, that low level blue belt who has still have some good accolades, you've won some competitions, right? Like that's fantastic. That's still an incredible feat. And it's perfectly okay to be balanced in that category and be a blue belt forever. Will you possibly progress to the next level? Sure. I mean, why not? I mean, you definitely could, but it's at the right pace and the balance is there. It's not getting knocked out. Your body's not deteriorating. You're not beating yourself up. You're not slaving yourself to do things. You're having that balance where instead of physically overexerting yourself in this category and then being mentally drained the rest of the night, you get that yin and yang, that even out, that flow that is overall better for health, in my opinion, in the long run.
I So I'm going to talk about ego, and I want the listeners to understand where I'm coming from. So the question is, would I rather be Hickson Gracie right now? I'm 61, I think he's 63, or me? Would I, not you, would I rather be me? I would rather be me right now. And here's the reason. One, I worked my ass off on myself in mind, body, and spirit, and I've attained this level, and I like myself. Do I always like myself all the time? No. You mentioned being self-critical. I'm very self-critical. I have melancholic disposition, which means if I don't do all of my mind, body, and spirit stuff, my good rest, my good sleep, my interactions with Nate, my travel, and I become a little bit higher power person with a Zen mastery as much as I can, I'm a depressed person, which is not uncommon in our modern world. But let me talk about the path that I've been on versus the Steve Jobs and Hickson Gracie path, which is this high achievement, incredibly high achievement. So both of those people had a vision. Both of those people were innovators. Both of those people had a way to do things that revolutionized what they were doing. Bruce Lee also had that, Muhammad Ali, all these people did it. But what they didn't have is they didn't have balance. And Hickson Gracie, love the guy, met the guy, he's on my LinkedIn page. I offered to work with him in writing his book back in 2005, but he'd already had a relationship with someone who wrote that book, which is his biography that came out within the last 2 years. But what Hickson didn't have, he didn't have postural person to teach him postural analysis. He didn't have rest and recovery. he didn't have the financial wherewithal that his older brother had, who made him sign a contract before he came to America, that he couldn't develop the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and compete with his brother, which was brutal. His brother had a law degree, and he had him sign that, Horian Gracie had him sign that contract. So he had a lot of hardships happen to him, and he kept fighting and kept, going through these challenges. And unfortunately, over the last few years, he has spinal issues where he has discs where there's no cartilage in between those discs. So he's living in pain. He can't do physical activity very well, and he's now got Parkinson's. So pusher, achiever, that revolutionized Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and training and breathing to an incredible degree, which we all honor him for. But what I would have done if I were his brother or a friend that he adopted as a brother, I would have asked him, say, I'm a thin guy who gets injured easily. Let me teach you about recovery. Let me teach you about not pushing yourself all the time and signing contracts, because I'm really good with contracts. And I wish I could have intervened in his life, because I'm this empathetic, caring person, to allow him to thrive a longer time than he did thrive. And if Hickson's out there and I can help him, I've met you before, connect with me through my website. And I'm still hoping that there's a way I can help great athletes and great innovators like yourself have more wellness and balance in their lives.
Yeah, Sifu, I think that's a great message there for sure, because you see commonly people have what I like to call a slow burn, or excuse me, a slow burn or a fast burn, right? And I always use like Ronnie Coleman. Do you know who that is?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So Ronnie Coleman, right? Literally the peak of human physique. I mean, the guy he looks like a Greek god when he was at his prime. Okay. That's the late 90s, early 2000s, right?
He looks like a gigantic Greek god. I don't know any Greek gods that were that big.
That's true. But he looks like Zeus, right? But like two to three times the size, right? I mean, he could be
Yeah.
Hercules' brother with a tan, essentially, right? Um, but here's the deal. Look at him now. Look at him 2024. He can't walk. He's in a wheelchair. He's still in pretty good shape. Like he still has some muscle mass to him, but like his body, his hips, his neck, his back, his knees, they're gone. They're gone. So he was running, short fuse, 100 miles an hour or 100 miles a second in his case, right? For, let's say 8 to 10 years, and he was dominant and won Mr. Olympia and Mr. Universe, all that good stuff. Like that's fantastic. But for what? His legacy is now, bedbound.
Disabled man.
Exactly right. So I think I understand what you're trying to say, and I agree with you. I'd rather have that guy that does well, but keeps his athleticism, keeps his mental wits about him, keeps his physicality, keeps his ability to walk, keeps his ability to hug his loved ones and daughters and sons and all that good stuff, and to be able to walk with them and all these things. So I think you're right. People either have a short fuse or a long fuse, and you can see that sports is the most prevalent matter of that, right? You see athletes who don't take care of themselves, who are freak of nature athletes. But what happens? They have all these injuries, I'd say 75% through their career that leave them injured forever. They have issues forever that are indefinite. Versus you see the guys that take care of their body, that are spending, if they spend 2 hours a day in the gym, they spend 4 hours a day in recovery, doing various methods, stretching, cryotherapy, eating right, sleeping, all these things, the sauna, the cold plunge, the whole 9 yards. They're doubling their efforts for recovery. They're eating all the right things. They're taking the right supplements, and that is not just going for the physicality side, but it goes for the mental side as well. I think for me personally, Sifu, some things that I struggle with, and I'm not no athletic freak of nature by any means. I'm a decently athletic guy. I'm a little overweight right now, but it is what it is. But my mental capacity is where I really have my strengths, in my opinion. And I think I've never thought about this until talking to you just now, but I'm glad that we had this conversation because I'm going to implement it into my life. But my brain, like I said earlier, runs at a high level frequency, and I'm letting that run indefinitely. And I'm never taking the time. Let's say I have my brain, let's say I work 10 hours a day, right? Typically I do. Let's say my brain's running high frequency for 10 hours. Well, there's not enough hours in the day to double the recovery, but there's enough hours in the day for me to get those 10 hours back in recovery. and plus add 2 or 4 more before bedtime, essentially. So I think for me personally, one thing I'm going to try to implement into my daily system is to not have my brain function at high levels at all time, and to give it the relax that it needs, and to give it the recovery phase that it needs. So then the next day, I'm able to run at full cylinders again, but I'm more balanced.
Yeah, hallelujah with those observations and parts of your commitment and your learning, Nate. That's really good stuff. And this whole idea about outperforming each other, we could talk about that at a future podcast. I trace it all back to ancient Sparta, and before them, the tribal warfares between the hunter-gatherers. But you can really see in ancient Sparta where they had a standing army, and they were famous for having a standing army. It was hard for agrarian societies that had some cities to afford a standing army because everyone had to provide food for their family, and they're out working in the fields, or they're merchants in town, or in itinerant merchants coming through with things to sell. It was really hard to do that, but they put together this standing army. And what they told, the message they gave young men was, when you go off to train, you're going to train. It's going to be brutal. A lot of the Spartan people at age 15, 17 died during the training. It was so brutal, and not always giving them water and things that they needed for their sustenance. You can have a heart attack just based on not getting enough water and being out doing physical stuff with or without heat. You can have a heart attack, right? So dehydration. So this whole idea of saving our country, saving our village, saving our parents by being the Spartan warrior, and then sacrificing it all, so that the slogan was the mom, giving the shield to the son and saying, you either come home with the shield like
Or
you've
on it.
won, or you come home, you come home on it, right? And so whether that's part of mythology or it's true, the message was still there. They told those kids to go out, and it's like a parent saying, do your best in school, do your best in sports, treat your girlfriend right. If you're a mom talking to the son, those are some of the things that, and we're still using that, I think, faulty mentality. Faulty because we shouldn't be clobbering each other. The two different gang members should not be clobbering each other. The two different sports people should have a beautiful athletic competition, not trying to wound the person and win the game, or wound the person for life, not trying to steal each other's girlfriends. All this stuff that the Homo sapiens do, that the animals do, there's part of our evolution is supposed to be, in my opinion, moving beyond that stuff and being more collaborative and being more heart open and mind open, and not these contentious bastards that we're acting the part of. It's really that stuff is why we have nuclear war and corporate brutality. We really need to be more quote unquote human and evolved and zen in the way that we live and the way we treat ourselves and each other.
No, I agree, Sifu, 100%. And here's my kind of philosophy on that. I've had that conversation with other people, and I've always thought that I'll relate it to business. Business is collaborative, not combative. It should never be me versus you. It should be us versus the problem. And where the real issue with greed and things like that come into factor is whenever somebody's over competitive and they're trying to dominate the market. I want to be successful. I want to have a bunch of money. Yes, of course, that's fine. But there's more ethical and better ways to do that and obtain that wealth than to, undercut your competition and, slander their name, XYZ, all the good stuff. So that's why in my sales career, always, and even when I talk to other people, I have a rule that I started 2 years ago. I try not to talk bad about individuals unless they're present. Why? Because, I'm feeling a certain way about them, and they have every right to defend themselves. Okay. And defend that physically. Hey, if it comes to that length, and so be it, I'm ready to defend myself. But hopefully they come to the lengths where they defend themselves verbally, and we can have a dialogue and conversation so everything can come to light and we can understand exactly what's going on, right? In business, it's the same way. I think what you said is true, and what we talked about before the podcast started. I think we are a tribalism community as humans. I think that's how we activate, right? And how do tribes survive? Collaboration. I'm the strong hunter-gatherer, but you're the basket weaver. We're both vital and critical to the tribe. It's not a competition. It's survival, and it's collaborative, not combative. So I think that's true. I think the issue in America per se, right, because we're such a um, greedy, corrupt society, in my opinion. I'm the most patriotic person in this world. I love my country more than anything. I would die for this country if given, if needed. But and I would die to protect the citizens and the freedom of our nation. But I think there's a lot of corruption that is so embedded in our society that it's more on the combative side, where people have no longer an interest in helping others or learning from others. Me, for I've kind of been blessed to meet some mentors of mine that have kind of led me the other way, which is the way that you're talking about, which is fantastic. But anytime I've met somebody who's kicking my ass in a category, it has never been a combative response for me. It's been a collaborative. Hey, how can I learn as much from this person as possible so I could better my game, sharpen my weapons, hone my skills, because they're obviously doing something proprietary to them that's right. I guess I had on early on in the podcast, Dr. Charlie. He spoke at my wedding. I looked at him as a father. He's one of the most influential people in my life. I love Dr. Charlie to death. I would do anything for him. And we met because he kicked my ass in a video game that I thought I was very, very good at. He destroyed me, and it wasn't even a contest. And the typical response is to, talk a bunch of trash to him and throw him under the bus and, say X, Y, Z. But I didn't. I said, hey, man, I need to learn everything that you have to offer. And I did. And now I can beat him, and I beat him multiple times. He can still beat me for sure. He's very talented at the game, but like, to have the ability to say that I can beat him it's a game changer. And I've always looked at business like that. I've always looked at my workplace like that. I've always looked at life like that. Not to go on too long of a rant here, because I want your response, but one thing that I've always kind of struggled with is I've always compared myself to others that I know, friends, adversaries. I've always compared myself and kind of paced with, oh, well, they have this big of a house. No, I need to buy this big of a house. They have this new truck. No, I need to get a new truck. They're doing this. I need to do that. And about, I'd say, a year ago, I had a revelation where I just stopped comparing myself to others. And the only person I ever compare myself to is myself, right? I'm always just trying to beat myself yesterday, right? So January 26th, I want to beat that dude's ass. This is January 27th. I want to be better than the guy I was on January 26th. But no longer am I comparing myself to people, because we're all in our own little, linear journeys, right? We're all in our own little wavelengths, our own paths. And there's no point of comparing, because it's never going to be fair no matter what you do. And the person that's comparing themselves to you on the other side of that coin, they're looking at you through a different lens anyways, and it's not ever going to be fair for them. So for my opinion, to have that combative comparison, between each person is really detrimental, not only to your mental health, but as a society, as a species, as humans, we don't get anywhere either, in my opinion.
Well taken points, Nate. I think, humans sharing information and wisdom, observations, all these things is so important. The human dynamic, the human interaction is second to none. What you and I did in the last hour or so helpful for both of us. We hope it helps other people that get a chance to listen or view this and listen. And just watching a documentary and taking notes, it's great, but it's not the same thing as having a face-to-face, even if it's over the internet. It does something. It's like taking a walk with someone and hashing things out, reflecting. It's so important. And I hope more and more we can reintroduce this to people who've become so digital based and so electronic based.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it all starts with the awareness of what we just talked about, right? Like, people need to go back to those roots. There is, like, for example, my buddy of mine I call him a hippie, but he's actually a really funny guy. He's really smart too. He's like, Nate, have you ever just walked through the woods without shoes on? And I was like, no. I was like, why the hell would I ever do that? I mean, there's thorns, there's, snakes, there's whatever, right? Why the hell would I do that? He goes, just try it and tell me how you feel. And I had done it a couple times, and I've walked through some woods without shoes on. And then I'm a man of science myself. I'm a religious man, but I also think that science and religion goes hand in hand. So I always try to find a logical reason of why. And I did some research that, walking through a forest without shoes on actually has real medical and mental benefits. I mean, it's huge, because your body's absorbing those nutrients through the soil. You're getting those vitamins and those things, and you're having those interactions with the other living organisms that are underneath you that, although can't talk, they still feel, they still act, they still think, right? And I think the biggest part of it is getting back to those roots. No pun intended with the nature stuff, but getting our species back to those roots of there's a right way of doing things, and we've just became so jaded, so corrupted, so pushed the wrong way that people forget. And then now they wonder why there's a mental health crisis. Now they wonder why there's an obesity crisis because we're doing everything so ass backwards for the last 120 years. That's why. I think it's up to people like you who definitely have a great more understanding and a larger amount of experience and a better platform to bring that to light. And then people like me that are also growing in that direction to kind of validate your cause and give some validity, like, hey, I was a younger man, like this is real, these are the real realities of life. So I think you hit it right on the head.
The question I ask people when I meet them sometimes is, if we just talk about one piece, mind, body, and spirit, and fitness has to do with mind, body, and spirit. You can work on all of those things. Is your fitness sustainable? That's the first question I asked them. And I said, you don't have to agree with everything I say, but do you mind if I argue my point and defend the point and discuss the point? All those things are important. And sustainability gets you from where you are now to where you want to be the best way possible with the smoothest ride possible. And we're oversold. You mentioned the modern day and the obesity crisis. We're oversold that people want to look like The Rock. So somebody who's fitness oriented, they want to look like The Rock. And he's one of the top grossing incomes of all of the Hollywood talents, anybody in the world, not just Hollywood, but any actor in the world. He's one of the top, if not the top. So that shows you, it's not just his acting ability, it shows you this Greek god superhuman thing that people are gravitating to, right? It's crazy. In my opinion, it's crazy. So you've got that thing. That's a goal. That's a false goal. Then you have people who are obese, and their goal is always to lose weight. And if they're predisposed to carrying more body fat on themselves, predisposed to adipose tissue, and they have a sedentary life, and they're addicted to foods that it's very easy to become addicted to bad foods, their goal forevermore is to lose weight. They're always jumping on the scale. This is crazy. Where's the idea of being a fit 12-year-old to a fit 20-year-old, and whatever your schedule is, just maintaining some facsimile of that for as long as you can. And then when you're retired, you have more time or whatever, you want to learn some new skills, fine, you do that. But this idea of transformational fitness, taking your body now and looking like The Rock, or taking a person who's 300 pounds and saying, I want to be 200 pounds, and they're constantly in that battle. These are battles that are not sustaining. You have to find something that's sustainable. And that's part of the important message I hope people will receive from me.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll say one more thing. I know we're getting close to time here, and I want to be respectful of that. But you see all the time, I've struggled with weight my whole life. When I was 6 years old, I was 115 pounds. I was a big kid. I'm like 5'9", 5'10" with shoes on. I weigh 225 right now. I weighed 280 when I was in 8th grade, and I weighed 280, and I was this tall. So I was a big kid for 8th grade, right? And I've struggled with weight my whole life. I got addicted to a substance known as Adderall when I was a freshman in high school. I lost 135 pounds. So I got down, to 150 in a year, essentially. Did I look great? I guess, sure. Was I healthy? Absolutely not. I was having heart palpitations. It developed into a later heart issue that I have now, unfortunately, bradycardia, which, it's nothing crazy and it's not going to kill me, probably not, but it still plays a factor. And I don't drink caffeine or do any stimulants because of that. But, that substance abuse issue goes to what I'm trying to say here is like what you see often. The word sustainability, what you said, is critical here because people are 350 pounds and then they do these crazy life altering things or surgery or whatever to get down to 200 pounds. What happens? They still die of cardiovascular issues or diabetes or liver failure or liver cancer or kidney cancer or pancreatic cancer in their 50s. Let's say they do the transformation in their 30s. They still die of those illnesses later due to two factors. One, because of the terrible, pain that they put their body through being obese, okay? And then the dramatic non-sustainable ways they did to lose the weight. Instead of doing it gradually and sustainable, right? They went to these great lengths to make this weight loss change for aesthetics purposes, not for health purposes. And what happens? They still die of the same illness they were going to die of anyways, because their body now has just been wrecked twice, essentially, instead of once. I think when it comes to health, fitness, on the mental side, mind, body, spirit, like you said, I think the word sustainability, which has kind of been an underlying tone of our conversation, I don't think that word gets used enough. I think it's all about results, what people are driven for, to be, The Rock or whoever, right? And I like The Rock. I think he's a good, cool guy, whatever. But I think the word sustainable is huge. For him, what he does is sustainable. He's been a freak of nature his whole life. He's been an athlete his whole life, and he looks like that for so. But his method and his regimen is sustainable. That will not work for everybody. You can't take a 350-pound man and him do the Rock's workouts and it gives good results. He might lose some weight for sure, but like what's going on internally, So I love that. I love your idea on that.
Fantastic. So Dwayne the Rock Johnson, I wish you all the best. But I would guess that you are stiff. We guess that you're fatigued a lot. And I would guess that you have to use some substances that are not beneficial to your body to allow you to recover, allow your tissue to grow, and to alleviate pain. That would be my guess. I'm willing to be proved wrong, but that would be my guess.
Sure. I think, you're probably right. And I think a lot of athletes have to do those crazy things. I think there's some natural athletes out there that do things the right way. But I do think a lot of these people out there are abusing substances to accommodate for what they're lacking on the balance side, for sure. So yeah, I'll tell you what, man, I think we'll wrap it up here. I just want to say, hey, thank you so much for coming on. It was such a blessing to hear your perspective and such a unique outtake on everything. And I just want to say thanks again for being on and being my episode 18 guest.
Big aloha, Nate. We're going to do it again coming up, and we can keep these conversations going and bring in some cool topics, and maybe the viewers can list comments and some of the topics they would like us to touch on, and go to your platform and keep fertilizing it. And if they want to go to mine and take a look at what I'm doing, just go to sifuslim.com. Got more than 1,000 videos now on my YouTube channel and growing. And if you have other people that want to participate, share conversations, have them reach out. I'm open to all perspectives, not just athletics and fitness and wellness, but like the Rogan Show, all perspectives. People have something they're passionate about, have some knowledge in, have some questions about. I'd love to have them on my podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely be sending people your way because that's how I like to do it as well. Open dialogue on all subjects and all topics. Guys out there, if you are listening, I want to thank you so much for coming with us to this journey all the way to this point. If you haven't already, check out his page and all the links that he mentioned before. And if you haven't as well, like, subscribe, listen to us on Spotify, send me a message, whatever you want. If I could be of any benefit of help to anybody, I'm always here. But I want to thank you guys for joining me. I want to thank my guests as well. And let's take over the world, guys. Thanks.
Aloha.